Good evening. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Warren Planning Board, July 22nd, 2024. I'll ask for roll call, starting with Blake. Present.
Jenny Flanagan.
Fred Massey.
Mike Gerhart.
Harry Delafosse.
Jim Lippers.
And we do have a quorum, so we'll move ahead. The first order of business is the approval of minutes from last meeting. Are there any questions or concerns about those? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the minutes as written. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next order of business is the comprehensive plan public hearing pursuant to RIGL 45-22.2-8A3 and 3 little i's. I'll ask for this public hearing to be opened. I'll make a motion to open the public hearing. I need a second. Second, Mike. All in favor? Aye. The draft plan is found on the town webpage. What we will do on this is to take any comment in addition to the letters that were sent to us regarding the comprehensive plan under advisement. This won't be a discussion or back and forth. We did receive a number of pieces, one relating to cemeteries, another relating to the expansion of the historic district in Warren. Those will be considered by us. I will say at this point, our inclination is probably to take anything that comes in at this point that is a significant departure from the existing comprehensive plan and include it in a file which will be used as a means of amending the comprehensive plan down the line. The comprehensive plan is designed to be reviewed every year. This is not something that we've been doing here because we didn't have a comprehensive plan that we could work with. But moving forward, we will do this because the comprehensive plan is a living document. And as situations change, the comprehensive plan needs to change accordingly. We found this when we were putting the comprehensive plan together. Comprehensive permits didn't exist when we first started on the comprehensive plan, and they have made a significant impact on how we are moving forward with the comprehensive plan. That's just one example. Certainly, sea level rise played a huge role in our comprehensive plan for this year compared to the past one. So we'll take comments if someone has anything that they would like to say.
Chairman.
Yeah.
Might let folks know that 80 here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We want their comments.
Yeah, Crowhead Street, the folks who had put forth the proposal have asked for an extension, and as a consequence, we will not be hearing Crowhead Street. So if you're here for that, you may leave or stay as you see fit. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for all you people that serve on the planning board. Louis Frigo, 12 Taddy Avenue. Running for town council. I was on the town council about 25 years ago. When you run for town council, it's important to read the charter and the comprehensive plan. And I did, and I had to scratch my head. 25 years ago, we had a room full of people when we discussed the historic district. We used to leave here at 12:30 at night, not one meeting, not two. Probably lasted 6 months to a year. We had a heated discussion on it. And we came to the conclusion that a volunteer historic district was the way to go. The historic district falls on a low mod census tract, meaning there are a lot of people that can't afford it. However, we recognized there was a need for historic preservation, and through the ordinance, we gave tax credits. It's been working fine. Now, I own property on a historic tax credit, and recently, maybe it's been a couple of years, they changed the ordinance. I don't think anybody knew about it. I talked to General Valenti, who was one of the original people on the historic committee. He was the chairman of the committee. Talked to Frank Alfano, he was town council president. Spoke to a lot of people. We didn't know about that it was changed. And basically through the ordinance and through the demolition ordinance, they tightened it up to the point where it was mandatory. An ordinance can be changed, but when you put in a comprehensive plan, you're really tightening, you're really saying that's the vision of the community, and it's not the vision of the community. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The second thing I wanted to talk about, I've lived in Warren since 1967. Very familiar with Warren. When you talk about flooding a neighborhood, which we're talking about Market Street for years and years and years has had some flooding through the creek near James Park. But to assume that 10 years from now, that we have to move all these people, I just find it crazy, very crazy. It makes no sense at all. Once you put in a comprehensive plan, you're pretty much telling those people that live in those areas, hey, your house is worthless. And if it becomes worthless, who's going to make up for the taxes? Because if I owned property over there, I would come to you and say, hey, I can't sell my house. You've already told me it's going to be flooded in 10 years. I wouldn't be able to get a mortgage. I wouldn't be able to do anything with that property. So I found that to be very, very lucrative, I felt it to be wrong. The third issue I had was with the affordable housing. I'm all for affordable housing, but there's one line in there that says that it should be for perpetuity. I'm okay with the 30 years, but to have it in perpetuity, we don't know. Things change. 25 years ago, we were talking about open space. Heated debate, and we did a lot for it. Today, we're talking about affordable housing. 25 years ago, we had a Station nightclub fire. Awful, awful thing. The state put a lot of people out of business. And today we're selling fireworks on the side of the street. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, David Bolster. Was he going to get up? Go ahead, Dave.
No.
Sorry, 53 State Street. Just briefly regarding the historic section of the plan. The commission held a workshop back last year, and a number of people attended that and participated in the process. And at some point in there, we'd just like to provide a list of the names of those people who volunteered to work on that and have that listed in the plan if we can. That's all.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, sorry.
Hi, I'm Richard Valenti, retired Brigadier General, lifelong Warren resident. I was chair of the Historic District Committee when we formed it. I got to give you some background. When I found out that there's an attempt to make it a regulatory district, I had a real problem. Because I lived through this several years ago. We had those that wanted a regulatory district and those that wanted something else. And Frank Alfano put a committee together. I volunteered, ended up as the chairman. We spent a year studying the situation. We looked at a lot of all sides of it, hopefully. We found that the regulatory district that was then defined encompassed practically none of the historic houses in Warren. We found by search of records that at least 50% of the historic homes in Warren would not be included in the historic district. So we decided, and the other thing is, a regulatory district requires you to do certain things, and there's no recompense for that. We decided with a historic district, we'd offer a carrot and a stick. So as it worked, an individual who owned a historic property had to volunteer to be, getting cut off, had to volunteer to be part of the program. However, once they volunteered to be in the program, they had to follow the same Secretary of the Interior standards that would apply in a regulatory district. The only difference between the two is the ordinance provided for a rebate on the income taxes for those that completed the work in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior standards. So that was the carrot and the stick. I was really bothered when I found out recently there's an attempt to make it a regulatory district. I don't have recent figures. I've resigned as chairman quite a few years ago. But up to that time, we had seen something like $500,000 of improvements in historic properties in Warren through the voluntary program. So I would strongly recommend it stays a historic district and does not become a regulatory district, because I think that's the wrong way to go. Any questions?
No.
Okay.
I will note that we're reflecting what the town council has already decided on the historic district, which was done quite a few years ago and was done in a public process. So, unfortunately, apparently some folks weren't, paying attention to that. What we're doing is codifying the fact of an existing law. And we're not, and I would take exception to the use of the word crazy. I think when we're having a civilized discussion about a project that this board has worked on for years, crazy hardly is an accurate representation. No, Mr. Rego, that you've had your say. Okay, that's good. And I'd leave it at that. The historic district, again, is something that is in existence. This was not the decision of this board. It was the decision of the town council. So that's a matter that should be brought before the town council and not the comprehensive plan. Anything else? Okay. Then, yeah. Motion to close the public hearing. Mike, second. Blake, all in favor? Aye. Thanks again. We appreciate your input. This is something that we are going to be taking a look at in terms of where we go from here. Our intent is to get this comprehensive plan with any comments that the board feels are necessary to alter it or to revise it in front of the town council. The town council will be having a meeting on this, and then we want it to go to the state. The whole purpose of this is to get this in place. This is broad strokes for the most part, comprehensive plans. We don't drill down to specific zoning factors. What we're looking at is an overview, and then we're going to have to work on more specifics of the comprehensive plan as we move forward. So again, this is something that we've worked long and hard at and given it a great deal of time, and there have been public hearings throughout, which have been well attended by people who are concerned and care about their town. So our feeling is that we've done a good job, not only in terms of our own work, but in terms of publicizing this and taking comment from the folks in the town, as well as from outside the town, which has been very helpful. The next matter is the application 10 Liberty Street Partners LLC.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if you've closed the public hearing, if you are intent on making any changes to the comp plan, you should do that. And then if you intend to send it to the council, you should send it to the council with motion with any changes that you see fit to the plan.
Do you feel we need to meet before we send it to the town council?
That's the question for you as a group. If you feel that there is change that needs to be made, you may want to continue your discussion of this to the next meeting. If you're comfortable moving it to the council with change or without, again, that's for your decision to make.
Mike?
I think, we've spent a lot of time on this, and we're at a position where I think it's ready to go to the council, and that people can have their input there. But the provision that whatever the comments we receive now would sort of end up in a file and therefore be available to inform the first revision of this in a year seems to me like a good idea. So I think I would move that we transmit the current version of the comprehensive plan to the town council.
Second.
And I think with that, just as an amendment to that motion, that when putting something in a file suggests that we're gonna put it in there and forget about it, we are not gonna do that. I mean, this is, the filing of this information would be a part and parcel of giving the comprehensive plan to the town council with the idea that this would be revisited, within a year, not necessarily waiting a full year, to take a look at some of the comments that have been made. I mean, clearly, there are issues that still need to be resolved. There are new things that will come up. So as part of that acceptance of the comprehensive plan now, it would be that any of the comments that we received relative to the cemeteries, relative to green belts, relative to the resiliency, climate resiliency, would go into a file. So again, that the motion is made by Mike, seconded by Jenny. With that amendment, all in favor? Those
Aye.
opposed? Okay. Now, the application for 10 Liberty Street, again, let me mention that 75 Croad Street, which is application B on the agenda, will not be heard tonight because the applicants had requested an extension. They've also accepted the fact that the clock that would be ticking, Ben?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. So we do need a motion when we get to that. I just continue to next month, but in fact, they did put in writing the formal request, which is required by Rhode Island general law.
Okay. So 10 Liberty Street Partners LLC, comprehensive permit, preliminary plan, 20-unit owner-occupied condominium housing development, including 5 affordable units. This is a continued application. It's a continuance of a public hearing. Let me note a few things here. This is the preliminary plan.
Mr.
That-
Chair, may I?
Sure.
Member Costa needs to recuse himself, and submitted the paperwork at this point, just,
Oh, okay.
it's not a conflict.
Sorry about that, Blake.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
What's important to note here on the Liberty Street matter is that this is the preliminary plan that we received. We did have submitted a plan that revised the preliminary plan, and we received that, and it has been entered into the record. We are not going to vote on that. We're voting on the preliminary plan. The plan that came to us prior to the last meeting was work done by the applicant to meet the recommendations that had been made by the staff and approved by the board relative to the preliminary plan. So we got a little bit ahead of ourselves. And what we'll be doing tonight is asking for comment on the preliminary plan. Take that comment, and then if there are comments about the final plan, we can take those, but we're not going to vote on those because, quite frankly, based on at least one matter, though that plan, that second plan, will probably still need to be revised somewhat based on a matter relative to the fire chief's concern about access. So that would be looked at in the final plan process, that secondary plan. Again, we're not putting a damper on commenting on that, but be aware that you're commenting on something that we're not going to vote on. So we'll handle the preliminary plan first, close that, and then move to the plan that we received that you can make comments on. But again, I think that that's going to change significant, or I shouldn't say significantly. I assume that there will be some changes to that before it comes as final plan. So I believe that, I don't know, does the applicant have anything to say relative to preliminary plan, or?
I believe at this point we will, but the opponent as their planner here this evening
Yeah.
And after that planner speaks, then I think it's appropriate for us to address, including the last issue you just raised on what you're calling the final plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
The continuation was, as I understand it, there is, from the attorney who is representing Mr. Aldi, you had, a final witness that you wanted to put forth?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Kelly Morris Salvatore for Frank Aldi. I do have with me tonight Doug McLean, who is AICP certified. He's a land use planner, and I would ask that he present his comments. You did receive a written report.
Yes, we did.
He will need to make one correction in that report. It was just a typographical error. So with that.
Again, brevity is appreciated.
I will do my best. My name is Doug McLean. I've submitted a report for the record. I don't wish to belabor the details of that. You have it in front of you. I think it's fair to say, based on the way that you just framed it, is that these comments are still geared towards the preliminary plan submission. I do have a question before I continue. After you take a vote on the preliminary plan, you said you're going to take comments on what has been provided after.
We're not gonna, we'll take comments, before we vote on the preliminary plan, we'll take comments, I think, on that plan that was inadvertently publicized, before our vote.
Understood. Is that going to be considered a final plan?
No, it was, I believe the applicant was looking to answer the recommendations that were included in the staff recommendations, but we had not yet voted on the preliminary plan, so it was premature for that plan to come out. It's not, I can't call it a final plan because we haven't had the final plan, that part of the process move forward. So it's an awkward situation for him here, and it's somewhat unusual.
It seems as though the value for you is to make comments on the initial plan,
Correct.
the initial preliminary
Correct.
plan. Any comments on the future plan, you're wishing to reserve as part of a separate discussion. Is
Yeah.
that fair to say?
Yes,
Okay, I just
Prior
want to make sure I understand.
Prior to a vote on the preliminary plan, correct?
Correct.
Chair?
Thank you. So I think I fully understand you, and I would say my comments, which the main comments that I have, the main arguments I have in opposition to this project haven't substantively changed as a result of some of the modifications that had been made and put out there. So these comments, I think, were applicable along the way. The first, I think, just I'm going to keep it brief, snapshot. The first comments I have are about density. The applicant's proposing 20 units over the course of a site that is just a little over half an acre. They're proposing a density of 32 units per acre, and that is the correction for my report. I had transposed those numbers in my report and I said 23 units per acre. It's actually 32 units per acre that the applicant is seeking. Based on my review of the surrounding area, generally the average residential property in this area exhibits a density of about 10 units per acre. So they're seeking 32. The average in the neighborhood is about 10. One of the most dense properties in the surrounding area is across the street, a 4-unit dwelling. And that, even at one of the most densest of the existing neighborhood, is at 26 units per acre. So they're still significantly above even the more dense properties for the residential context of this neighborhood. I'd also like to talk about scale and massing. I think that's an important consideration in this. The applicant is seeking a new structure, a 3-story structure added to the rear of this property. It's my opinion that that new structure is significantly taller and more massive than the average structures that you find in this neighborhood. The average structures in this neighborhood are either 1 to 2 stories in height. This structure is certainly at a different scale and massing than we typically see. Really, these arguments come together to form my opinion, which is that this application as proposed, particularly the density and the scale and massing of the new building, are not compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. I'd like to just mention, I'm not a preservation expert, I'm a planning expert, but you have heard from opposition preservation expert by the name of Brent Runyon, who has submitted a report as well that opines that particularly the size of the rear structure, the new proposed structure, is such that that structure is no longer going to be considered subordinate to the primary structure on the site, which is the school. That's an important consideration for historic preservation. Really, the nature of the historic preservation review on this, as it's codified in code and as it's also reflected in the comprehensive plan, is that in addition to this property, that new structure should be subordinate in nature, and the size and the massing and the scale of it, it is not. So with that being said, I want to touch briefly on the site design. You've heard from David D'Amico, an engineer, a civil engineer on behalf of opposition, who previously opined 2 months ago that there were safety concerns with the nature of the site design. I know there have been changes to that, and some of those changes I think were intended to address some of these comments, but I have to say that the site as it's currently designed is trying to accomplish too much in too small of a space. There are inherent conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles, and there are many parking spaces that exhibit a unique and awkward design that I think inherently invite certain conflicts of turning movements, could create confusion in there. I know there have been changes to that, but to be honest, I think those comments stand at the initial submission. And I think even some of the changes I have not seen have really fully addressed that. I think there's a safety perspective based on conflicts of pedestrians and vehicles. And I think it is still open to discussion as to what type of emergency access is there and what level of detail of plans have town staff commented on as it relates to emergency access. I'll leave that one there. I don't want to go point by point to my comprehensive plan analysis. The comprehensive plan is a significant document to review when looking at a comprehensive permit. Page 5 of my report does, page 5 and page 6 of my report does cite a number of sections of the comprehensive plan of record for this document, finding that the proposal is inconsistent with the predominant themes of the comprehensive plan, that the new housing development, including affordable housing development, must be compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. Again, it is my finding, having reviewed this against the neighborhood, that it is not compatible. And so I think that the plan also prioritizes historic preservation, specifically for new development. I do not see that reflected in this proposal. It's my professional opinion that this plan is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. That concludes my comments for tonight. I'm available for any questions that you might have, and also any redirect that the attorney may have for me as well.
Thank you. Anyone? Okay.
Yep. Thank you very much. And I think it goes without saying that my professional opinion is that they have not provided the evidence on the record to substantiate the required findings for a comprehensive permit in this case. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else commenting on preliminary plan for Liberty Street?
I'm just a little confused about what is happening here tonight. I've been doing this for a very long time, and it sounds like you are about to consider a decision on preliminary plan when you have a plan that there's an intention to revise, which doesn't typically happen at preliminary plan. I'm concerned that, I mean, during this entire hearing process, members of the board have commented that the building proposed on this plan is too big. It's not subordinate. So, I mean, they should be presenting you with a plan that you can approve on paper. I'm very concerned about that. I don't know what your decision is going to be tonight, but with all the comments that you've made over the course of these hearings that I've attended, this plan does not comport with your concerns.
Well, I would say, first of all, have not been here for all of the meetings.
I have.
For every one of the meetings on Liberty Street.
No, on preliminary plan I have.
Yeah, but
And I've
prior-
watched,
prior to that, we have had a long
yep,
time of meetings.
And I have
and those
reviewed all of
comments
those.
that were made about the building being subordinate were in relation to the recommendations on the part of the Secretary of Housing. I believe.
agreed.
And through the course of, over the course of time from the original plan to where we are now, this is quite different from what we originally looked at. But again, as I explained, this is what we're looking at. The other plan that came out essentially shouldn't have been publicized or brought forth.
Uh-huh.
So what we are been told by our attorney that we can only look at this plan and at the staff recommendations relative to this plan as opposed to this secondary
Okay.
plan.
And my only point is that I hope you still recognize that this building as proposed is still not subordinate
Right.
in accordance with the U.S. Secretary of Interior standards.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And just to help to add to the confusion is that the town solicitor at the last meeting basically indicated that the planning board, because of the supplemental plans that came out, the public should be offered an opportunity to speak to that, though ultimately the planning board is going to be acting on the preliminary plan, the application of record, which is up on the screen behind me. But it does make sense to, because as Davison had said, you can't unsee the supplemental stuff, that it, as at least as a courtesy, you should entertain comment on that supplemental or that sort of window to the future of what the applicant is willing to do.
Was there any other, did you want to comment now?
If I may,
Sure.
as we are in different territory here. There were some concerns. You made a comment about the fire chief having concerns on the site, but he looked at the other plan. We do have a letter from him of June 14th of this year saying that the unseen plan does in fact comply with the minimum requirements. I mean, this is the problem. We have been before this board, 5 TRCs, then a formal TRC. We've modified the plan in accordance with the requests of this board ad nauseum. We have reduced the parking along the fence. We have modified the buildings repeatedly. We've gone to situations where we were requested by this board to look towards in the master plan, look towards reducing the number of 3-bedroom units, and that's been done. The condominium documents lay out all the procedures of operation of this site. In the final plan designation, we can address the elements, but this board has approved a master vested concept of 2 buildings, 20 units total. How that's configured finally is what final is all about. Preliminary says we've done the engineering. We've shown you the building, the pathways. We can address if the board would entertain it by Cordy Dawson, who is an architect with historic significant experience, about the size of the new building and how it is in fact subservient to the school building. It is horrible, in my opinion, that people are condemning the applicant for wanting to build an additional building in order to be able to preserve the school building. Nothing has been done in this town for decades about preserving that building. In 2017, the second-story theater was foreclosed upon. They were using it there. Of all the wonderful things, it's just a workshop to build sets for the plays. Then they lost it in 2017. And now here we are approaching a decade rather rapidly from then. And finally, someone has come forward and put their efforts in here. Nobody in the town of Warren did a thing to try to preserve this building. the applicant is. Historic preservation doesn't occur in a vacuum. It has to be funded somehow. Nobody sought grants. Nobody went out and tried to preserve this building. So we are
Well,
in
I
a
would say,
position
you mentioned you had a witness who would speak.
to
to
address
the-
that, absolutely.
Why don't we go to that? Because I mean, we,
Hi, my name is Cordelia Dawson. I'm with Cordelia Dawson Architecture and Design in Bristol. I know I was not at the meeting where the question was asked about whether or not the proposed new building was going to be subservient to the existing school. And I just wanted to talk about this. I'll try and keep it brief, but the historic standards and bulletins are published as a set of guidelines to help local municipalities, commissions make decisions relative to historic properties. They are not laws. They're guidelines to help you make complicated decisions about what to do with these valued properties that we have in our towns and communities. Specifically, Standard 9 addresses new additions. And according to the National Park Service, which helps interpret and understand these standards, I'm just going to read to you commentary on size, scale, and massing of the new addition. The size, scale, and massing of a new addition all pertain to the addition's overall volume and three-dimensional qualities. Taken together, size, scale, and massing are critical elements for ensuring that a new addition is subordinate to the historic building, thus preserving the historic character of a historic property. Typically, a compatible addition should be smaller than the historic building in both height and footprint. However, there are other considerations that may allow moving away from this basic concept. Depending on its location, it may be possible that an addition slightly taller or slightly larger than the historic building may be acceptable, as long as it is visually subordinate to the historic building. In some cases, separating the addition from the historic building with a small hyphen can reduce the impact of an addition that is larger than the historic building. This obviously doesn't apply because we have two different buildings. Another way of minimizing the impact of a new addition to a historic building is to offset it or step it back from the mass of the historic building. So I would argue that the footprint submitted as part of the preliminary design, or not the foot, but the three-dimensional qualities of that structure could fit the requirements for being a subordinate building. Not only is it stepped back from the existing building, it has less decorative ornamentation. It is still has a high quality to it, but it's simplified, lacking decorative elements such as the cupolas and the different stone elements above the windows and the corbels that line the roof line. So it also is subordinate in height. The one quality that is not subordinate is the footprint, which is only slightly larger than the existing building.
So Ms. Dawson, is it your opinion that in fact, the new proposed building is in fact subordinate as submitted to this board to the school?
I think it is based on the complicated conditions of the site and the context of the existing building.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing me back on focus. But as you can tell, I was kind of passionate about what's been done here by my clients and what is happening. The plan, I think, as submitted, and as I recall, when Mr. DeSisto was here last week, he was asked by Ms. Medeiros, could we look at the unseen plan and use that as guidance for conditions? And indeed, conditions are in the planner's report. You can use those conditions as well to form the basis of a motion. And then we can proceed here with preliminary approval.
anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my name is Joan Coltrane. I live at 1 Stonegate Road in Warren, and I'm a little confused. Bruce Cox, the attorney for the applicant, has indicated that the fire chief has approved the fire lane, the narrow fire lane, in the proposal that was submitted on June 17th. The letter from the fire chief is dated June 14th, indicating that that this plan does meet minimum requirements for fire department access. Well, this letter is dated June 14th. The submittal of the plan that we're not supposed to be talking about, the cover letter, is dated June 17th. So I'm not sure how the fire chief would have seen the narrow fire lane that's indicated in the June submission. And we have very good evidence that he would not have approved that. So I'm not quite sure how to think about this issue. And I know that Herb had raised this issue. But let me go back to let me make one more comment, and it'll be brief. Let's assume we have never seen the June 17th submission, which the fire chief probably couldn't have seen either because his letter is dated June 14th. And his letter is very carefully worded, I think. He says, this plan does meet minimum requirements for fire department access. Clearly, he would be referring to the March 15th plan, I'm assuming. And I just wanted to speak to his comments. So Chief Sousa his carefully worded letter indicates that minimum requirements for fire department access are met in the March plan. Now we know that fire lane is significantly narrowed in the June plan, but we won't address that. I think it's up to the planning board to decide if meeting minimum requirements ensures the safety of families living at Liberty Street School and adequately indemnifies the town of Warren against legal action if rescue or fire response times are delayed due to poorly parked vehicles. We've spent a lot of time thinking about parking, concerned about parallel parking, concerned about how those parking spaces will be utilized. We know that illegal parking on Norbert Street and within that complex is an everyday occurrence. I have viewed it numerous times. Given that the Liberty Street School fire lane runs between the existing building and a row of tight parallel parking spaces, do we expect this site to be any different? Is approving a development that meets minimum requirements for fire safety a sound decision? If all we can look at is the March plan, if that is all we can consider, even though the fire lane narrows in the June plan, is that a sound decision? Thank you.
My understanding is that, and again, this is the problem with the second plan, as John pointed out, is that is not up for comment right now. However, my understanding is that the fire chief has seen that. And one of the conditions that we would put on a preliminary plan would be that the access to it met the standards set by the fire chief. I mean, we don't establish those, the fire chief does. In this case, at this point, the fire chief approved the layout. I mean, we've had issues with the parallel parking, what that means. It's out of our hands if the fire chief says, I can get a truck down there and this works. No, I can't. We're not going to engage in that. So in terms of, this is where it, again, this is confusing. I didn't do this. We didn't do this as the planning board. We're stuck, we're somewhat caught on the horns of a dilemma here because this second plan was well-intentioned, but ill-timed. And, that's what I can tell you about that. But again, John, hang on just a sec. So what we're looking at, based on this plan that we're being asked to vote on tonight, is a plan that would have to meet the same standards, the same safety standards that the fire chief would meet. And the final plan is the one that has to be accepted and is the basis by which this proposal would be built on, not the preliminary plan. The preliminary plan gives us one final bite of the apple, as Tony DeSisto put it at our last meeting. And then the final plan is a second and conclusive vote. Herb had mentioned, we're still, the final plan, we talked about the fact that that could come before the board or it could be done administratively. Again, I think one of the thoughts that we had was that given the degree of attention this has received, it might make sense to go for the final plan through the board. I don't know, what are your feelings about that, Herb?
A couple things, Mr. Chairman, and I didn't announce myself before. For the record, it's Herb Durfee. I'm the town planner. The plan of the application of record is the one that's up behind my head with regard to the access that's been effectively signed off on by the fire chief. There is one little exception, that this stairwell right here isn't shown in a reconfigured state. It's not intended to go straight down, but to come out and go off to a side, and that buys a little bit of a couple feet for the fire trucks to go by. That's something that will work out administratively between now and the formal final plan submittal. With regard to the access as it's come in the door through the supplemental information, this turns into angled parking here, and this distance right here is reduced significantly, where based on conversation with the fire chief as late as today, but mostly including this past Friday, is not acceptable. And as a result, would not be allowed to proceed forward. So even though I give the applicant a ton of credit because the supplemental information that they did provide in response to a lot of the staff recommendations that are before you tonight, they made changes. They reduced the size of the building. They did the reconfiguration of the stairwell. They did do some of the stuff that was required. There are certain things that, as you can see from my report that came out before the fire chief and I chatted, there's still some issues with regard to the handicap parking and its measurements and that sort of stuff, but that's in my supplemental or addendum report. But again, the bottom line is that this is the plan of record, or the application of record. This is what the planning board is acting upon, I assume tonight, but I don't know that. I will say that if you do not act tonight, your 90 days is about to expire, and you would have to have a special meeting between now and the August meeting in order to meet that 90-day deadline. Again, I think it would be important for the planning board, as Mr. DeSisto had recommended at the last meeting, is to take some time tonight to hear what comments people may have on the supplemental information, because there are things that are in there that do strive to meet the staff recommendations or along with the TRC. But the access point pretty much kills that particular plan if you were to take that of record because of the access. So again, you're getting a window to the future, but it's not formal. At some point, based on your action, they will make particular changes. I assume a lot of the plan will stay the same as they've given you the window to the future, because they are willing to further reduce the building. They are willing to get rid of the other 3-bedroom units. And so there are things to that supplemental information that are directly responsive to you as a planning board and the comments that you've heard. But there are some mistakes and some things that do need to change in order before it can get into, say, a building permit process. So again, this is the application of record. You pretty much have heard and had a number of meetings with regard to the public hearing, including by Mr. Aldi's representation. And then take some time to hear comments on that additional information that was submitted. Then at that point, please decide whether you are ready to deliberate and close the public hearing and act on it, or if you need to schedule another special meeting before the 90-day timeframe.
Could you go through your comments, the staff recommendations and what the responses were? That might help clarify some of what we're talking about.
So I'm more than happy to do that. Listening to my town solicitor in my ear, I think it would be good for the planning board to hear the rest of the public comments that may be out there with regard to matters, including the additional information. And then I'm happy to answer any questions of the planning board at that point, including going through my staff report.
Okay. Anyone else?
Good evening, members of the board. I'm here representing the Historic Commission, Dave Bolster. Bolster. You've all received this report.
Yep.
Much of the history and stuff is similar to what was already presented. We reworded the summary. We just wanted to stress that because of the comprehensive permit law, the Historic Commission is not permitted to comment, or not comment, but decide on what happens to this building and this property. So your board is sitting in our stead. And so we hope you have read through this and absorbed the material to look forward to making a decision. There are findings that we feel the board at least has not publicized yet about the various aspects of the project. Number 7 is, of course, about the impact that this project would have on the historic district. We have not seen that yet. There are recommendations in the back for conditions if you did decide to move forward with this and approve this. Again, these are reflecting of the existing preliminary plan. These do not reflect the new submitted plan as per the recommendation from the last meeting. So I know that there are a couple of things in here that have been addressed, but this report was designed to respond to the existing preliminary plan. With that, do you have any questions?
And that was the recommendations for approval of the Roman numeral 9 was what you were referring to in terms of the revision to the earlier document.
Yes, yes. So Roman numeral 9 are the actual recommendations from the board, which if the board were ruling on this, we would attach to our approval if we were to vote on an approval. So.
Right.
Okay.
We all received that. That was called out both in terms of the previous submittal and then the secondary submittal, but that Roman numeral 9 recommendations for approval was the updated element that was provided.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please do.
So I'm Frank Aldi, 33 Miller Street and direct abutter to the proposed development. I came here roughly 2 years ago when I acquired my property. I'm a newbie to you, to all of you. But in this very short period of time, I've really become to love this town. So you must please believe me that my intentions are very, very earnest about Warren. And I'm really concerned that with the situation that the town is in, and I'm referring to the financial situation primarily, I'm afraid that we're moving into a territory where the town cannot do the things to secure a wonderful future here for all of our citizens if we become subject to legal exposure based on liabilities that we possibly could incur. I'm very much concerned that it could break the town's financials back. And therefore, I just ask you to please really consider that the exposure that we are opening ourselves up when we approve projects on a minimum just good enough level to appease whatever requirements in order to make it happen. There's nothing wrong to reject this and have the developer reapply under the 2024 rules of the law, which would mean a smaller footprint for the building. That means everything else could still happen. Everything else could still happen. I'm not against development. Everybody that I've talked to wants this thing to happen in some form, just not this monstrous building in the back that through its density puts so much danger on so much potential burden onto the town of Warren. Because let's say somebody gets 30 seconds too late help in the back, or there's a fire that duplicates every 30 seconds in volume, and the fire department can't get through that because the parking is way too narrow. Now, the chief may have approved that, but can we afford to expose ourselves to that kind of risk? And then there's we have shown the public now that there is some money to be made in a lawsuit. And I think that should be of concern to all of us moving forward. Because I think you've seen or heard there's other lawsuits that are, like somebody trips and boom, there's a lawsuit all of a sudden. That would probably never have happened in the past. All I want to say is, please exert as much scrutiny and caution. And sometimes it's better to do the right thing than doing things right. That's all I have to say. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate your concerns about liabilities. I appreciate the fact that this is meeting a minimum. We are constrained somewhat in this situation because of the comprehensive permit. We recently had a decision go against us on development. And frankly, in terms of massing, scale, density, it was so far beyond this. And yet it was rejected by the State Housing Appeals Board. It was rejected by the State Superior Court. So we have to keep that in mind because those things also cost us money, as did that lawsuit and the trip and fall. We don't want Warren to become the town that lawyers in law like to go to, the personal injury lawyers. This is, obviously a concern, but there's, in the balance, we have to look at it and say, do the experts in town feel confident that this can be met? At this point, the fire chief feels, yes, it can, that liability doesn't exist. Now, I don't know enough about the law to know that if somebody doesn't park their car adequately in that parking space, my understanding is that the condo association would be responsible and not the town for any issues that resulted from improper parking, for example, if the fire truck could not get in there, there would have to be, and that was my understanding of the agreement that would be made by every person who bought into this, that this would not be a liability for the town, that it would be in fact a liability for that homeowners association. And Bruce, did you want to speak to that?
In terms of the fires, identify the buildings in this community that are sprinkled. Both of these buildings will be sprinkled. That's been committed to, and you're both gonna have storage connections at the building. So in many regards, approving this will improve the ability of the fire department to fight fires in this area because storage connection at either of these buildings can be utilized to fight fires on an adjacent property, Mr. Aldi's property, other properties. So I mean, they're gonna be sprinkled buildings. In terms of the parking, yeah, condominium documents are gonna have the identified parking on them. They're gonna be identified to the unit. The parallel parking units have been reduced to a total of 8, and they're longer lots now. So vast majority of the cars will be straight pull-in parking, as shown on the existing plan. Actually, the unseen plan shows you the 8 parking spaces. So the point is that, and today is this very moment is the first we've heard of any kind of problem at that southeast corner of the school, but that can certainly be addressed. That's a no-brainer. That's easy to do.
One other thing that Mr. Aldi mentioned was the 2024 reapplication would allow a smaller or demand a smaller footprint of the comprehensive permit. I don't remember.
I would have to look at the application reference to see
Yeah.
one on the top.
Okay. I mean, it seemed to me that the 2024 thing was even more in favor of developers as opposed to the previous one. So I'd just be aware of that.
That's a legal argument for another day.
Okay,
Well,
It's on the record and
Yeah.
in other
Okay.
words, it's outside the scope.
I do want to speak to the
okay, sure.
And I do want to say that, you just mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that you're relying on experts in the town to make this decision. One of the required findings that you have to make is that there will be no significant negative impacts on the preservation of historic or cultural features that contribute to the attractiveness of the community, and that you can deny this application based on concerns for the environment and the health and safety of current residents, which goes back to that historic implication. You've had several experts from the town discuss the implications of this building in the back that is not not subordinate to the main building. You heard from Mr. Bolster, the chair. You've heard from the vice chair. You've heard from other members of the HDC. You heard input from Ned Collins, who's a historic expert. You heard from our historic preservation expert, Brent Runyon. You heard from all of those people that that building is not subordinate to the main building. You also asked this applicant to reduce the size of the building, and they did. They came back with the June 14th plan that reduces the size of that building. So that's something that everybody understands. We don't think even the 614 plan goes far enough in terms of reducing the size of the building. But you've had all these people, experts from your town, plus from Mr. Aldi, telling you that that big building does not work back there. Now, tonight, for the first time after, as you said, we've been here many, many times. The first time tonight, we hear from Ms. Dawson. I've never had the opportunity to work with Ms. Dawson. I don't know what her credentials are. I know she's an architect. But after hearing from 5 different experts about the implications and what you have to address in your required findings, I would ask respectfully that Ms. Dawson explain her experience in historic preservation, redevelopment of historic sites, and specifically adding buildings to historic sites. Only then will you know if she's an expert rather than just reading a regulation that any one of us could have read. With regard to the 2024 amendments, I just want to be clear. The 2024 amendments, which I am intimately familiar with, require that if you're presenting 25% affordable housing, which this applicant is, you can provide at least 5 units per acre. If they provide 50% of affordable housing, you can provide at least 9 units an acre. And if they provide 100% of affordable housing, then you can provide as a bonus 12 units an acre. So with 25 units an acre, they're at about 2 units for this site. So I just want to be clear that it came up. That is what the state of the law says. We can read it, but it would be a lot different if they had applied on, and that's what I mean. It's 32 units an acre, 32 units an acre. It's too much, 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. And you said it during master plan. You said it's a square wheel in a round can, and that's exactly what this is.
First of all, in terms of experts, nobody has been qualified as an expert here. Davison is not an expert. He
Mr.
was
Chair, I
not.
would actually,
The chair.
it's all noted in terms of anybody's resumes. Take it for the value that you individually believe that it's worth. And that's, it's up to the applicant if he wants to put her resume on the record. But it's certainly nothing that.
Yeah, I just don't want to get wrapped up in, who's an expert and who isn't, because that, and I've heard people read from the Secretary of the Interior. I mean, there's a number of ways of approaching this. And again, that is not to denigrate the experts that have spoken against it. In fact, they have played a significant role in our deliberations and in terms of our statements to the applicant. The applicant has responded. This has not been a static situation. This has moved forward with changes as we've gone. That's why I said before the preliminary plan, a great deal has happened since this proposal first came before us and continues to, as we saw in the plan that we're not supposed to see. But that, so that's one element. Again, I'll let Mr. Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We, to my experience, have never had cross-examination of experts before this board in the 30 years that I've been before this board, doing a number of various projects of various sizes, some quite significant. The board makes its own determination upon the credibility of the person. As it relates to the law that was just cited under the new 24 regulations, those are floors. Those are not the ceilings. Those are absolute floors. You shall grant that at least. She's trying to make an implication that we're so much more. It sets at least, and you are at will, at large, and able to exceed those floors. That's the objective of the floor. Floor is a minimum. It's not a ceiling. And that's, I want to make that abundantly clear in case it was confusing in the manner in which it was presented, because while she does say at least, the manner in which it's been pitched is not saying it clearly. So I want to make that abundantly clear. The commentary about the neighborhood surrounding this area, the backyard people are single families. The front yard people are multifamilies, very dense. And that's not been looked at. That's very dense. And when I say the front yard people, I mean the people on the other side of Liberty Street. In terms of historic preservation, what's been done with this building? It's not going to harm this building to have a new building in back that's subservient to the front building. It's going to protect and preserve the historic element of it. The new comprehensive plan speaks to demolition by neglect. That's a term within your new comprehensive plan. And that's what's been happening here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, just in the interest of expediency, I think you should maybe funnel your request for anyone else to be specific to the supplemental information that was done so that you do get to hear those particular comments and then decide where you're at from that standpoint.
Anything else on supplemental? Okay,
So it looks like nobody from the public is asking to speak, therefore it's appropriate at this point to have a motion to close the public hearing. for this application.
I'll make that motion. Second,
Okay.
all in favor? Aye. Okay. What we have before us is a staff recommendation that we've all read. This is to me, based on what we've talked about, some of the things that weren't included in the staff recommendations was the reduction or the reconfiguration of the stairwell, which we would want to add to that. The parking must meet the requirements for emergency access and approval of the fire chief. And that the condominium documents make it explicitly clear that responsibility for any liabilities would be the responsibility of the condominium association.
Look at language similar to make sure that it's private property, therefore condo association. We will draft that language to make sure that towns covered in proper liabilities put on.
Okay.
Sorry, they've submitted their condominium association documents from that standpoint. We should have solicitor review those to make sure that it does comport with what you're requiring, which is the parking related issue and the enforcement of it.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
So I had expressed a concern in a prior meeting that one of the affordable units, the one that's in Liberty School building, is in the basement. And that
Speaking to the mic.
that the comprehensive plan law from the state says that all the units should be the same as all the other units and be indistinguishable. And it seems to me a basement unit is highly distinguishable from the other units in the school building. I don't know how to solve that problem short of having one of the affordable units be on an above grade floor in the school building. But I'm putting it out there that it doesn't conform to the standards for a comprehensive permit by having a unit that is not standard to the other units.
Any response to that?
That's the new plan.
Okay.
Let's see.
Okay.
So could.
So can we have that as a?
Why don't you go through your comments?
Yeah, we can have that as a condition. Again, that the units within the school building reflect that commonality with all of the affordable units, with the market rate units, excuse me.
And forgive me, Herb, with regard to the lighting, there had been a comment by, at a prior meeting about, some of the lighting being very high on the building. And I believe your staff recommendations had addressed that in terms of making sure there's no, that it's all shielded, that it's dark skies within that standard, that there's no bulbs visible, that's all in your recommendations.
It's all in my recommendations. And again, there will be one, we can address it at final plan, but there's one light fixture that is not down shielded. It's more of a historic lantern style. So that's something that again, that's from the unseen plan.
Okay.
But so that is something that that we'll need to address at the final plan, because again, when you talk about some historic preservation versus the modern way of lighting, you know, historic districts didn't have a down shaded lighting, but it is definitely a fixture that is intended to be in keeping with a historic character.
And one last question, which is to the Historic Commission's recommendation specifically about the third story. That the third story have some kind of architectural element so that it doesn't appear like three identical floors, that there be dormers and a roof structure that comes down as an eave to the second story. I don't know whether that's something that we can put in at this time, whether that would substantially change the footprint of the third story, but that would certainly go a long way to subordinating the look of that building to the Liberty School building if it were 2 stories with a apparent finished third floor. Well, I'm not suggesting that you cut a floor off. I mean, there's a.
Thought was you'd have the roof look like.
I was just trying to stop you.
Like to do something like that. Cordy has something she may be able to show you to accommodate.
It can be a condition, in other words, yeah. I'm not gonna.
Would you please introduce yourself for the record? I'm sorry, say what you're gonna say.
I'm John Lannon, I'm one of.
Ms. Dawson, please invite her up.
Okay, I'm John Lannon, I'm one of the developers. Cordelia Dawes is my architect, she is of note for historic projects in Bristol and Warren. She just told me she can accommodate that request. I didn't realize she could. There's something she can do on that third floor. And you could make it a condition of approval. I'm not sure what you could show her on right now, but if I could bring.
No, that's, I mean, again, if we can, if that is, it certainly is something that would add to the visual subordination of the building. This is what we're looking at. I mean, the footprint's larger, the look of the building is subordinate. I mean, one of the concerns that I had with the Historic District Commission's comments was that they wanted brick on the outside, and that was something that we had discussed at length, and it was decided that brick was not an appropriate siding for this building because it should look significantly different.
Right, it was competing. Somebody mentioned it was competing with the other, by putting the brick facade.
But this particular approach, if it maintains the same number of units and does not substantially. Dawson.
Hi, I'm Cordelia Dawson again. My only point is that it's possible, it's quite a bit more expensive. So to take that into account, it's something we'll have to work through though, if it's a condition.
Okay. All right.
So I would move preliminary approval
Wait, I'd like to hear Herb's discussion of his comments.
Sorry for the chuckle. Hold on.
Thank you. Because there were a few things in his comments that he was that we needed to decide.
The staff
Board needed to
recommendation.
decide.
The staff recommendations for the preliminary plans, application of record or the supplement?
has to be the
Yeah.
application of record.
after-
Just clarifying.
No,
That's,
that's,
This is
that's
one that we
the,
were given,
that's the addendum.
right?
no, this is a supplemental.
All right, then the supplemental, I'd like,
No, because we're not
That's not it.
we're not looking at the supplemental, we're looking at the
This is
preliminary.
The supplement.
we were just asking for public comments on the
Yeah, but this is-
supplemental. Why
that
can't
was-
hear
that was-
about this one?
The point was that we had to allow public comment on the supplemental, but that once that public hearing is closed, our focus and our vote was specifically on the preliminary plan.
But we could add recommendations that are in the supplemental to the current staff recommendations as a part of our approval.
That's correct.
Okay.
So what's up behind me is the addendum. And it has green highlights throughout as to where it's changes, and then everything else in the black and white serves as the staff recommendations for the application of record. We are gonna get through this someday. So basically, there are some general changes on the cover sheet. Essentially, the parking configuration as it relates to the application of record remains somewhat problematic from the standpoint of staff. There is some suggestion that there's some removal of some parking spots and moving of a handicap spot that can occur that we think would deal with this. That would by removing 3 spaces, reconfiguring a handicap spot, that would leave 27 total spaces for the 20 units. That still would result in an amount above what the new comprehensive permit allows them to go down to 1 unit, 1 space per acre. So they would be losing a few, but not to the point where it's obtrusive
1 space per apartment.
per unit.
Yeah, you said acre.
Did I really?
Yeah. I just
Getting
wanted-
old, sorry.
So what about the bedrooms? Are they no more 3 bedrooms?
So
Correct.
the plan of record has, they reduced from master to preliminary, they reduced the number of 3-bedroom units from what they had to a certain amount. The window to the future shows that they eliminated the balance of the 3-bedroom units so that it would only be 1 and 2-bedroom units.
Because if I recall, that was one of the conditions on our prior approval.
Correct.
So
So
that,
that's.
There was confusion that occurred with regard to the master plan approval, with regard to what the motion was by Fred versus the way the written decision came out, because Fred had said, reduce the number of 3-bedroom units as much as possible. The staff report had said, remove all of them, which got reflected in the written decision. The clarity was made by the applicant, at least during some of the discussion that we had from that standpoint. This decision can further clarify that should you choose to. It's apparent in the window to the future that they're willing to eliminate the 3 bedrooms in their entirety. So you seem to be that the applicant, I believe, listened to you from that standpoint.
Okay.
There are a number of language changes that are required in the erosion control sediment stabilization sediment control plan. Basically, just some general changes since we don't have a town engineer. It's referring to the DPW director and or the building and zoning official or both. We asked that a new note be added to the erosion sediment control with regard to basically construction debris and possible trash. They already do, as part of their record, have a controlled entryway for trucks coming in and leaving the site. But I also like to add language that indicates that they need to be diligent about their adjacent properties and ensuring that there isn't, a piece of tieback that blows over into someone's yard. They can go and pick that up, at least on a daily basis or as they see it.
What about the garden apartment in the basement?
So the garden apartment in the basement on the plan, I can't remember, on the plans of record, we have what's proposed. Jenny raised a particular issue which you can incorporate as part of a motion that you make, that they look at the configuration of where the affordable units are. And again, the window to the future shows that they have trying to address that to a degree, but you can certainly make that as part of your
So-
motion.
Is that basement apartment, there is an apartment down there and it is to be.
It's a garden
set aside
style
for-
apartment, correct. At the time, it's the only one that's down there. And they had originally designated that as an affordable unit. But they're willing to make the change based on what Jenny had said. So again, you can make that a condition of any approval. Okay, and that does, one of the findings that you need to make is that the units are integrated throughout the development from the standpoint of it's really from an exterior perspective. You should not be able to tell from the exterior which are the affordable units. Interior wise, Jenny raises a good point that the perception that someone living in the basement may be discriminated against as it pertains to somebody, say, up on the third floor with a view. So that's the integration question.
Yeah, now I remember the discussion about that, it was lower because of access issues, and thought it might be easier for folks to get in and out of the lower levels.
But I will say that the applicant has put affordable units in and around, integrated them throughout the buildings. I think with addressing the question of the garden style apartment, you will have effectively be able to make a positive finding.
Was that the only one in the historic building?
Yes.
Was.
Oh, there's-
The affordable units?
2 affordables in front and 3 in the back. We would ask this to move forward in the future. We were already approved in the other configuration by Rhode Island Housing where we did it. We did a statistical balance based on integration.
So there's 5 altogether, 2 in the main building, 3 in the back. And all floors? Some on all floors, some on third floor, some on second floor, some on first floor, just all.
Yeah,
You get 3 floors and 2 apartments, so.
And they're at least as the application of record and including the window to the future, you can see the affordable units are all identified on the floor plans.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So we talked about the floodlights, the ones that were not.
Right, so generally, the plans as they originally came in didn't have a lot of detail with regard to that. I made the request from that. Again, they've made, as I'm looking here, I'm trying to get that information. Again, window to the future, it shows that they're providing that information, that they've identified them on the building elevations. I've received the cut sheets are all in there from that standpoint. There's one fixture that I would find questionable from the standpoint, not that I don't like it, but it doesn't meet the dark sky requirement, but it has what I would call the attempt at matching a historical preservation perspective with regard to that. So I think if that what you should do is keep the dark sky recommendations as part of your particular approval. And then if they continue to wish to put forward that historic style light that's not dark sky rated, they can put that forward and then it can be decided at a final plan situation as to whether that is okay or not. But basically they'd be on the hook for doing all dark sky related fixtures.
Could we make a contingency on that particular historic style fixture to have a lighting style that is not having significant
yes.
spill like the front of town hall?
Correct, and you could give that as direction toward the final plan and a condition, should you
Okay.
choose. I'm kind of ripping through because a lot of these are just.
Yeah, all the windows in the
smaller
original building
comment.
were nothing's changed on the historic building. Those are new windows and they're staying.
That is correct.
That's correct.
That,
Okay.
yeah, error on my part before I was under the impression
Yeah,
I
we talked about
somehow
that
read
back
something that
and
I
forth.
thought the historic building, the former school, the windows are going to be replaced. They're not. So my staff report is in error with regard to that aspect of things.
Ms. Dawson?
I just want to be careful here because in your window to the future set, there are a couple damaged sashes at the apartment level that will be replaced, but these are readily available pellet aluminum clad windows. And these are types of windows that have been used on historic projects in neighboring towns recently. So there are a couple sashes that will be replaced on the existing building. Those are identified.
So if those are being replaced to Mr. Chairman, just the Historic Commission is usually pretty adamant about reviewing stuff. If there's existing wood, as a, for instance, wood sashes that are in there, just replacing with aluminum or vinyl is not generally acceptable by them. They will accept it, but usually after some level of discussion as to whether there really is no other solution from that standpoint. So I would think that at least a condition that indicates that if it's matching in kind with what's already there, that it's a repair situation, that's probably acceptable. If there's a situation where there's wood that's there and not anything else, which I don't think is the case, the group, the recommendation for me to you, based on my experience with the Historic District group, would be that the wood has to go back in. And
Right,
not-
so we're saying that you're replacing or repairing in kind the existing window.
Thank you.
We talked about the light fixtures. Reading ahead of me. The landscaping plan, there was some conflict between the bike rack, some of the benches and all that. Window to the future, they've made that particular correction, but it stands that they would need to make sure that there's no conflict between and among plans with regard to proposed site improvements, including landscaping and or building related matters. One question that I raised as part of my staff report, which I think is a big issue. It's not a big issue for me, but it could potentially be seen as a big issue. The lindens would be going away out front. The applicant has suggested replacement lindens for that. The big concern that I have with regard to putting lindens in with regard to lindens is that the lindens will grow into the power lines and the other utility facilities that are hanging there. Therefore, I do not believe that the street trees as lindens should be replaced with lindens. There should be another subject to approval by the town tree warden, some other form of street tree that would not ultimately at its maturity interfere with the overhead utility lines. Possible ones could be a serviceberry, Japanese tree lilac, flowering cherry, American hornbeam, and crabapple. That's not an all-encompassing list, but that is something that I would want any plantings to have the full opportunity to grow at maturity without interfering with something or being interfered with by another structure. I know the town loves the lindens.
So what are you gonna do with those linden trees? The ones that you're cutting down? I've had a member of the, of Warren ask me, could that wood be donated to be made into benches or something for the town?
Absolutely.
There was some local artisans and stuff that would be willing to take that wood and make it into a bench to be donated.
So I would suggest that as again, a condition that where possible and in collaboration with the town tree warden, that the applicant collaborate with the town tree warden on the saving of the wood where possible for adaptive reuse. And then you have the general findings that you need to make, which beginning on page 7.
Before we go there, let's make sure we have, so you're okay with all of the additional conditions that we've talked about now? You feel confident?
far.
Yeah, okay.
There was one other recommendation from the Historic district commission about window height in the first 2 floors of the building. I don't know whether addressing the massing of the 3rd floor mitigates some of that request, but the request had been that the windows on the first 2 floors in the new building shall be taller and better reflect the scale of the school. I don't know whether we want to.
I would suggest, Ms. Flanagan, that could be incorporated in as part of the recommendation with regard to the architectural detail of the 3rd floor.
Okay, so part of the recommendation for the 3rd floor is also include a recommendation that
I think it's a general architectural reexamination of the 3rd floor to see how that could be broken up so that it's not, as you say, it isn't just the.
well,
3
this
floors.
was recommendation for the first 2 floors, but yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, but yeah. Sorry. So yes, I would, in answer to that.
And all the fire stuff, these hookups, you're talking about these hookups are on the buildings for the hoses, right? For the fire hoses, that's what you're talking about.
That attract. Those will be positioned wherever the fire department wants them located.
Right.
There'll be
So
one
they
check.
wouldn't necessarily have to get a tanker truck back there. They just
Absolutely
need the
correct.
hoses.
That's absolutely correct. The water pressure on Liberty Street in the road is 60 pounds per square inch. If after the calculations are made with regards to the building that's approved and designed, if the sprinkler engineer does an analysis, and he says, you've got plenty of pressure. If the fire chief says, but I want more, he'll get more. Mr. Landon will not, his family is in the firefighting business, so he's not gonna fool around with it. Fire chief wants sprinklers with a backup pump. Whether the sprinkler company says it's needed or not, they will have one. And that those storage connections will obviously be available to the fire department at any time.
Okay.
Yeah, the source connection will be a function of the NFPA ratings, which is a building code for that. And it assists with the sprinkler system in terms of providing fire prevention as necessary.
I saw a lot of recommendations out of some planners in Canada about all this. I appreciate that.
And then again, starting on page 7, the general findings that you need to make from the statute are A through G. Should you make an approval tonight, you should make those particular findings. I would suggest for the record, as you may grant an approval with condition that you specifically cite these findings and make the findings, again, A through G. General conditions that would go with anything. Basically, if there are any temporary easements that are necessary, we would encourage the applicant to get those in place. There's been a prior development that I wasn't privy to, but did not get that sort of stuff, and it made it miserable for everybody involved. So that's just a general condition that we put in all of our approvals now. Obviously, if there are any state or federal permits that are required, those need to be obtained prior to issuance of a building permit. As a condition of any building permit, need to adhere to any applicable fire and building codes as set forth in NFPA, with special consideration related to the fire access, which has been outlined above, including building accessibility and the exterior access to all the windowsills. Prior to the issuance of any certificate of occupancy, if there are any fees that are owed to the town, obviously those need to be made payable to the town of Warren. I understand from the applicant, this is not the case, but it's standard condition that if there is any applicable proof of subsidy that's required, that needs to be obtained prior to a building permit. As-built will be required as part of the project prior to the issuance of any certificate of occupancy. There are zoning waivers that are requested. I'm not going to go through the whole list from that standpoint, but in order for the development to proceed forward, at least in the application of record, These are the waivers that have been requested by the applicant, and you would need to grant such waivers. And then there were a number of issues from the master plan approval that didn't seem to specifically be addressed. Basically, the hydraulic calculations with regard to, this is the water pressure test for the fire and rescue chief. In talking to the fire chief, that can be done as part of the building permit process. But it's something that I would prefer to see before as part of the application for final plan. That way, if there are any issues that need to be addressed, that it can be done before they get any further down the road. We talked about no vinyl or type of vinyl composite or similar material. I think the window, the window to the future does show that they've tried to address that. They are using a polymetric resin. One can say that's a vinyl product from that standpoint, but I would say it's much more durable and has the opportunity to be more of an exterior finish that it doesn't look like the shiny vinyl that we all think about when we talk about vinyl particular products. And they have the clapboard style, which is the sort of the hardy plank cement board sort of thing, but it still is a
What kind
polymer.
of maintenance is required on that thing?
I'm sorry.
What kind of maintenance is required on that kind of siding?
There's less maintenance required than vinyl, that's for sure. In some respects, there's less maintenance with regard to the cement board type of a product. Because
Does
of
it have to
the,
be painted every few years and all that kind of stuff?
they come in particular colors. The applicant has chosen colors accordingly. And actually, you can see more of that in the window to the future.
Okay. The concern is that an HOA is going to be maintaining this.
Correct.
You
An
want
HOA
something
there will be
easy
an
to
HOA.
maintain.
The HOA will have to deal with that. The function of the maintenance is not under the purview of the town. That will
Right.
be the property
Right,
owners.
but you don't want it
But
to
you
look
are
raggedy.
you are helping, I think, the property owners by discussing the products that you're being looked at. But primarily, you're looking at the exterior look of the building with a limited ability to review as it pertains to the materials and the fit of the materials as it pertains to the building. In other words, a little bit of historic preservation. You have some level of review under that, not a total review like you might under a design control district.
No, my concern is that it looks nice through the years and doesn't become an eyesore to the neighbors.
Since we're talking about this, can the exterior be brick or are we beyond that stage?
Originally, they came in with at least a brick looking facade, and based on previous discussion, we eliminated the brick look from the new building, and it's been focused on it because of the issue of subordinate looking to that they altered their exterior to be a clapboard style look rather than having brick that would interfere with the old school building.
I think the fear is that if they did new brick in the back, it would clash with the historic brick, and that I think the design principle is that to go with a totally different material so that it's not trying to look matching, because you're never going to get a match.
And none of the other buildings surrounding in the adjacent properties are brick. They're all a clapboard style. So again, it's a transition from everywhere else is clapboard to that being clapboard, and then you have the former school building, which is brick standing up. But if you, again, I'm not sitting here trying to argue. If you choose to revert to that prefer that method of exterior finish, you may do so. We already talked about the lighting. And then we talked about the the number of units. And again, the window to the future shows that they are eliminating the remainder of the 3 bedrooms and going to 2-bedroom. And unless you have other questions, that's probably
Is the footprint of that back building changing at all with the new proposal? It's going to be reduced?
the window to in the window to the future, the new building is about 85% in size to the building that you would be, that is the application of record.
But, this or height? Height is staying the same, but the
Footprint.
footprint is changing, it's shrinking.
It will be smaller, but think lengthwise they chop. The height stays the same and the width stays the same.
Okay, so that will help with the subordination issue too.
Any other questions?
Thank you. I appreciate you doing that for me.
So I will move preliminary approval, subject to the conditions in the staff report and the conditions that have been articulated by the chairman and Jenny. And I would delegate final approval to the planner.
Except all the findings in
Yeah.
staff report, correct?
Yes.
All conditions discussed at the
Well,
table.
the application record plus the staff findings.
Your findings are based on the evidence on the record.
Yes.
That stand up? We're good?
I think her has, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
I'd second that.
Can we discuss that or?
Yeah, discussion.
Discuss.
Yeah.
So,
Who seconded it? Jim? Did you just second that?
no, the chairman
Oh,
second.
it did.
I would like to see the final. I know that that's not the norm, but I would like this board to approve the final rather than the planning staff.
Well, we've been through it a lot and we've been really articulate on what the conditions would be. So I'm not sure why we need to see it again. The applicant has sort of been here a lot.
Right, and I feel your pain in that.
Are we voting on a plan of the building with a larger footprint?
No, we're good.
Recommendation can be to reduce it to
You reckon
85%.
that the proposed.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Jim. So one of the conditions is that it would be reduced. The size of the second building would be reduced because as we know,
Well, that's
it's
what
been-
Mike said. Mike said it was
But
conditioned
by
on
state-
staff report.
it makes it real. Yeah, so. Right, Jim.
So, and to that point, that's kind of one reason why I would like this board to have eyes on that final approval and to also give the public the opportunity at that very last stage to come again and to ensure that everything that has been asked for and that we are recommending has made it through the process.
See, I would trust our planner to do that. And quite frankly,
Okay.
we have gone through
Yeah.
this a long time.
Mhm.
And in this case, ordinarily, I would say yes, but I think given the fact that we had the unseen plan plus this preliminary, I'd prefer not to do this again. We've got a number of projects that are going to be coming before us in August that are going to take a tremendous amount of our time. I think so my recommendation would be that we stay with the motion as made.
I'm not good at Robert's rules, but I would like to make the motion. Like to make the motion that we amend it, that rather go before the planner and, you know.
That can be let's deal with the motion to approve or deny first, then subsequent to that, we can make a motion to whether or not grant the authority to final approval to the planner versus
Okay, so pull out that, are you willing to pull out
So
that
I'll-
one
yeah, I
section?
will revise the motion to eliminate the planner doing the final review, and instead we'll deal with that as a separate motion.
So state the motion again.
So it's a motion to approve the preliminary plan, subject to the conditions that are in the staff report,
And Jenny's.
and Jenny's concerns and Fred's concerns.
Accept all the findings and staff report,
Yes,
and all this is based on all the evidence on the record.
yes.
And consider the changes to the architecture
As discussed.
pursuant to Jenny's discussion.
And that the building area will be reduced by 85%.
That's in the staff.
85%, not
That's in,
five.
But to 85%, yes.
that's in the staff.
I'm sorry.
We got a motion?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Stand by on that vote.
At one point in the current master plan field, the appellant has made an issue of the fact that the town didn't specifically articulate the
you see those?
A through G. Apologize.
So- Absolutely. So instead of just referencing, accepting the findings.
Findings
in
A
the
through
staff
four.
report, as the planner noted, his findings, if a member will put the findings of the board on the record, I think that's a request.
You-
That's-
you
that's
want
a
it read in?
reasonable request, correct. Your request.
Do you want me to do that?
List them all?
I will list them all.
Yes. Motion.
You want me, will you go to the motion first and then the findings?
Concerning the Rhode Island's,
Motion to revoke it.
okay, can we have a motion to revoke the motion?
Thoughts, yeah. Motion, now you make a motion to approve.
Well, we need to revoke the motion first, so I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The new motion includes concerning the Rhode Island statute pertaining to low and moderate income housing, IGL 4553-1. There is information the applicant is required to submit, and there are findings the town needs to make. As such, it's recommended that the planning board find that A, the proposed development is consistent with local needs as identified in the local comprehensive community with plan, with particular emphasis on the community's affordable housing plan, and/or has satisfactorily addressed the issues where there may be inconsistency. The applicant's preliminary plan proposal is consistent with local needs in the town's comprehensive plan, so long as the applicant adheres to the conditions stated in their respective decisions, which include the conditions of the master plan and the preliminary plan approvals. Proposed development is in compliance with the standards and provisions of the municipality zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, and/or where expressly varied or waived, local concerns that have been affected by the relief granted does not outweigh the state and local need for low and moderate income housing. The applicant's preliminary plan is in compliance with the standards and provisions of the Warren zoning ordinance, so long as the applicant adheres to the conditions stated in their respective decisions, specifically the conditions of the master plan and preliminary plan approvals. All low and moderate income housing units proposed are integrated throughout the development, are compatible in scale and architectural style to the market rate units within the project, and will be built and occupied prior to or simultaneous with the construction and occupancy of the market rate units. The applicant's preliminary plan proposal identifies which units are designated affordable, and those units are integrated throughout the development. There will be no significant negative environmental impacts from the proposed development as shown on the final plan, with all required conditions for approval. No significant environmental impacts are anticipated as a result of the applicant's preliminary proposal, so long as the applicant adheres to the conditions stated in their respective decisions, specifically the conditions of master plan and preliminary plan approvals. There will be no significant negative impacts on the health and safety of current or future residents of the community in areas including but not limited to safe circulation of pedestrian and vehicular traffic, provision of emergency services, sewage disposal, availability of potable water, adequate surface water runoff, and the preservation of natural, historical, or cultural features that contribute to the attractiveness of the community. No significant impacts on health and safety of current or future residents of the community are anticipated as a result of the applicant's preliminary plan proposal, so long as the applicant adheres to the conditions stated in their respective decisions, specifically the conditions of master plan and preliminary plan approvals. All proposed land developments and all subdivision lots will have adequate and permanent physical access to a public street in accordance with the requirements of 45-2365. The applicant's preliminary plan proposal has direct access to Liberty Street, a town-maintained public street. G, the proposed development will not result in the creation of individual lots with any physical constraints to development that building on those lots, according to pertinent regulations and building standards, would be impracticable, unless created only as a permanent open space or permanently reserved for a public purpose on the improved recorded plans, and not applicable, no subdivision is proposed. And then the other general conditions, I don't think we need to read those.
No. And all conditions as discussed during deliberation, all conditions in the staff report, approval of the waivers listed. And all this is based on the evidence on the record, correct?
Yes.
You want to reintroduce the motion?
So I guess, well, we've been around the block here, so it's a motion for approval of the preliminary plan, subject to the conditions that are in the staff report and those that have been raised by Jenny and the chairperson. Is that adequate?
And
According to the findings that were just read.
yeah, parts of findings and approval of the waivers as noted in the staff report.
Yep.
And this is all based on the evidence in the record.
Okay, I'll second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the second motion is whether or not the final plan should go to the administrative officer, the planning official, or come back to us for another public hearing.
So why don't I move that the final approval be granted by the planner?
I would second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Opposed.
All right.
Bench spread.
Wow. Yeah, I think it was one that. Good move on your part, to talk about,
Thank you.
yeah. A number of recommendations, you know, that was good, that went through the Historic District Commission. Thank you. I think your contributions were very helpful.
Well, I think.
Yes.
Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that they understood the connections.
So,
You know, and.
okay. Any items not on the agenda that somebody wants to talk about? No, apparently not. Okay, the director's report, I don't want to go over the, I mean, we did get, everyone received the Superior Court decision on Settlers Green. I think what's important there, Herb, is moving forward with this, and Ben, you could probably help us with this too. What are our limitations in terms of?
So, Mr. Chairman, the only reason why I put this on here was to at least give the planning board the decision in case they hadn't seen it. That really was all, that is my only intention, because technically you're kind of still in a pending application process, even though you don't have one before you. But essentially the master plan that was that you denied, that was overturned by SHAB, and then the town's appeal was basically tossed out. Effectively, what that does is it gives the master plan a vested right, or gives the applicant a vested right to move from master plan to preliminary. So really, your review under the preliminary plan is going to be your heightened technical review from that standpoint. So if they come back in the door, say with the exact same plan with all the technical details, you can't get into the whole reasons why you denied it, as for instance. You can only talk about the technical aspect.
Are they back in the door? Have they
No.
submitted? No.
No, so again, that's why I don't want to get into discussion about it, because I know they're preparing it. I have spoken with the Bill Landry, their attorney. And I do think that it's imminently coming in back in the door.
And what is their time frame within which they must file for preliminary? 1 year?
So they have a vested right of 1 year unless the comp permit law changed that.
So 1 year from the Superior Court
Correct,
judgment.
correct.
Okay.
But if we get a new comprehensive town plan approved, the one that we're working on, does then this application go forward
It's-
under the auspices of the new plan?
That's-
Or are they grandfathered by the
That's-
prior plan?
That's a question I would rather leave off the record right now.
Okay.
Because of the pending nature of it. Nice question.
Let me just say that the Superior Court approves master plan, on the new one, there's no such thing as master plan. Now it's strictly goes like preliminary plan. So if somebody comes in today with no such thing as preliminary, master plan, it's just straight preliminary plan. So very fluid, very liquid, and things that are not closed yet, so let's just, that's it.
Okay.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, apologize for that, but again, it was just to give you, make sure that you got the decision. Sorry, were you
No.
gonna ask a question? The other, I apologize, I still owe you some written monthly things. I just haven't had a chance to do it.
Yeah,
It's coming, you know, because I have to do that because otherwise it gets too hard to do. And then I wanted to identify, sorry, I have to call it up here because with regard to low mod housing count information on an annual basis, the state asks for this information. So over the past year, you added 0 units that are deeded to your overall count from that standpoint. However, I did let the state know because I as much as you didn't add any new ones, I wanted to make sure the state understood that we still are working on affordable housing. So that because we have Liberty Street that's pending, 75 Crowd Street that's pending, Penny Lane that's pending, and Settlers Green that's pending. If you put all of those projects together as currently proposed, you would be adding 78 new low and mod units at some point in the future, which if you took our existing percentage count and added that in, we would get to about 5.29%.
which still is,
Which is way below the 10%. So again, the nature of the findings that you need to make under a comp permit are you're basically limited in terms of your conformance with the comprehensive plan. The 10% is still a controlling interest, if you will, in your decision-making process as it pertains to review of comp permits.
I'm sorry, in the current pipeline is how many units?
40
Seven.
for Penny Lane.
Five for Liberty Street, 3 for, yes, 5 for Liberty, 3 for Crowd, 40 for,
Penny Lane.
Penny Lane, and 30 for Settlers Green.
Okay.
But Settlers
so-
Green, this one, they're putting us behind because they're adding so many non-low and moderate housing units.
That's the problem with the comp permit process. As developers come in, putting in the minimum, the numerator and the denominator don't work well together. Penny Lane, yes, because the
That's the
numerator and
only
the
one,
denominator
right.
are the same, right? So, that one is the one that makes a difference, as a for instance.
While we're still a long way away, even with these new ones coming in, I will say, it's almost a 50% increase you know, it's going from lost.
Right, it moves us,
It
you know,
moves
moves
us.
us closer from that standpoint.
And it's a
That's-
big jump in 1 year.
Right. And that's just, you know, again, adding that, and I've tried to do the math correctly, but I probably made some mistake. But the bottom line is that it is a trend upward if that goes forward. There are other potential applications that are out there that I'm not at liberty to speak about right now. That whether they move the needle or not, I don't know. And it's really still as a function of what they're going to come in the door with. So
And we can also hope for changes in statute.
hopefully we'll get some stuff that's in that makes a difference, but also fits in with the character and the flavor of Warren.
And hope for some changes in statute that allows us to expand what the definition.
Yes, absolutely. I would love that. And I think as the housing study eventually rolls out, that kind of recommendation will be in there as to figure out how we might be able to get better credit for the significant number of units that we do have here that are affordable based on at least anecdotal information from the work of the Affordable Housing a committee that was trying to get some money out there for some rehabilitation, that we might be able to hopefully get at least some partial credit for that. And because I do think, as we all know, the nature of the counting of the 10% actually has a form of discrimination in it. It's not just straight what you have that's deeded. There are communities that have been given credit for certain things that other communities haven't. And Warren's one of the communities that hasn't been given. So we need to find a way to alter that formula so that it's more respective to the local communities, keep the state 10-wide goal, 10% goal, but let's figure out a way to recognize the differences of municipalities and the situations that we're in without compromising the need for additional affordable housing, which we definitely need.
Do we invest in economic development, or does the state provide like economic development support where they can go out and find the resources that can come together with these projects?
Yes.
We do.
So
Okay, we don't have to go down
it's
that.
not a,
We're just curious.
it's not a, I mean, we don't expend a lot of funds with regard to that. But I think that a number of our programs, policies, the way that we operate is intended to do that sort of stuff that maybe some communities have the wherewithal to do more to it. We get more involved in programs, policies, volunteers, and people and effort. And then the state clearly has some stuff that helps communities out.
Motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, did we formally continue 75 Coed Street?
No.
Just because that's a public notice and the motion has to be done.
Make a motion to extend the meeting for Crowd Street to our August, the normally scheduled planning board meeting, August 26th, I believe it is.
And,
Yes, it's fine.
and also to extend the
August 26th.
clock, right?
Yes, but public notice, meaning that public's already been notified. Therefore, if we continue, we don't have to be notifying. So we, at this meeting, we have to make it official, formal, and that's the notice. We don't have to spend any more money letting anybody know.
Okay,
I'll second the motion.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
And just so you know, that continuation, if you didn't pick up on it, you did get a copy of it in front of you tonight. But I did ask the applicant's attorney and they complied with it. And that is that they made a request further that the continuance not affect your 90-day clock with regards, so the clock stops with your motion.
So our next day is the 26th, is that right?
Yes, 26th.
Thank you.
Okay.